This is the lecture for Ancient and Medieval History for Monday, the 7th of March, 2022. Time is flying towards our Easter vacation. Woo! Which makes me happy. Oh, I didn't put these out. I've got work to return to you. So, where we were is that I had been talking about the Principate, the first century period where Augustus ruled and established a Roman Empire that was an empire but with republican forms. This empire with republican forms operated like a one-man autocracy. Augustus ruled, everyone else did what Augustus told them to do. But Augustus was very clever about this, appreciating how much the Roman people still cling to their notions of freedom. Augustus didn't rub their noses in the reality that they were now subjects to a monarch. Instead, what he did is he played a little game. And that game was, let's all make believe that Romans are still free and govern themselves. As such, instead of becoming rex or even imperator in all situations, Augustus preferred to use the title princeps, or first citizen, first among equals. We're all equals. I just may be first among them. Claire, maybe you got it weeks ago. I didn't notice. In any event, this is a great compromise in many ways. It reconciles to the Romans to their loss of freedom. It ends the civil wars. It creates stability. The Senate and people of Rome still seem to rule themselves. There are times when Augustus even loses debates in the Senate. But in reality, don't mess with Augustus. Don't steal from him. Because it's Augustus's money now, and not the Senate and people of Rome's, any government officials that enrich themselves at public expense are not merely robbing the public treasury. They're stealing from Augie. Don't steal from Augie. Augie will make you pay. Really. Don't do it. This guy loves money like a mafioso. And he loves power like a mafioso, but he is smart. So smart about it. So I've talked about all this. And I also talked about the rumors that are recounted in Suetonius's histories and Tacitus's histories and others, that Augustus had a scheming wife, Duda. Augustus had a scheming wife. Livia was her name. And Livia wanted her son, by a first marriage, Tiberius, to become the new emperor. And Augustus' grandsons by his daughter Julia, all ended up coming to violent early deaths, as did Julia's first husband. Second husband died of old age. Just one thing after the other turned Augustus's options to Tiberius, and only Tiberius. Now, in your notes, you have a series of pictures. Let's look at Augustus's picture. Now, obviously, these are marble portraits, but you can see Augustus on the upper right of the first picture page, reaching out with his hand. By the way, the guy to the left of Augustus, this guy to me embodies the spirit of the late Roman Republic. This guy eats oatmeal and does violence on the enemies of Rome.
The baby?
He is absolutely no, the guy on the upper left. Dan. No, we'll talk about the baby in a moment. Do not mess with this guy on the upper left. This is a free Roman. But by the time Augustus comes along, look at the cherub that Dan was referring to, clinging to Augustus' skirts. You know who that cherub represents?
Yeah, the Senate and people of Rome.
The Senate and people of Rome. Exactly. So Augustus is Big Daddy. He is the sugar daddy to the infantilized people of Rome, providing them with peace, prosperity, security. And the people of Rome are just, wow, thank you. That's the propaganda here. And it works. Augustus is one of these guys that takes freedom and is beloved for it. You don't need freedom. Freedom's a giant pain in the neck. No. What you want is order and prosperity and ease and comfort. Now, I don't have a picture of Tiberius here, but Tiberius is a different sort of fellow from Augustus. Tiberius, how can I put this? He's one of these brooding, intense fellows. Tiberius was huge and muscular. He had terrible strength in his arms. I mean, the kind of strength that can kill. When Tiberius was a general under Augustus, what was the saying? His drills were bloodless battles, and his battles were bloody drills. Now, what that means is that Tiberius was hard on his soldiers. He did not go easy on them. His drills were painful. People died in them. But the Roman army learned to fight. And Tiberius, in his youth, won many battles for Augustus on the frontiers. The man was competent. He could run an army, win battles, be relied on to do it. And when he was brought back to Rome to be an administrator for Augustus, Tiberius learned the bureaucracy. He learned how to count the money. He learned where all the details of spending were. He learned the political side. So when Augustus finally dies, it's no accident that Tiberius is his adopted son and his heir. And Tiberius, at first, does a very good job. He actually puts the Roman government on a for-profit basis. What I mean by that is he ends up dealing with spending in such a way that Rome develops a big savings account. He does not spend more than he takes in. The armies are very efficient. Tiberius wants peace and prosperity. Tiberius does not like the kind of nonsense that Pontius Pilate is engaged with in Judea, where he is making needless, prideful, stupid mistakes that cause Jewish riots. It is Tiberius that the crowds were threatening Pilate with when they said, "Crucify Jesus. We have no king but Caesar." They knew that Tiberius had already taken against Pilate. They knew that Tiberius thought Pilate was incompetent, or maybe incompetent, and they could blackmail Pilate with that. Tiberius was not a man to cross. But Tiberius had this flaw. He wanted to be loved. His brother, Drusus, and he had a good relationship, but Drusus got in Livia's way. Dead, or he just died of an accident on the German frontier. Tiberius loves his first wife, Vipsania, but Vipsania is taken from him because mommy wants him to marry Julia, Augustus' daughter. Most of all, Tiberius resents the fact that the Roman people loved Augustus. They loved him. They don't love Tiberius. They put up with him. They acknowledge him as a successful general and administrator, but they don't like him. They don't love him. Why? Because Tiberius is not particularly likable or lovable. He's this big, scary fellow. And he doesn't have charm. He's not a Julian. He's a Claudian. Those two families have very different histories. So Tiberius ends up resenting this imperium, this power of command that he has sacrificed so much to get, because his mother wanted him to be emperor. He doesn't really enjoy being emperor. What he enjoys is the kinky sex. So he begins to spend less time in Rome governing and more time on his private pleasure island of Capri. Picture Epstein's Island, but more perverse and more decadent than Epstein's Island. It is possible. Trust me. Study Tiberius closely. He did things that even Epstein wouldn't do. And that's saying something. Because Epstein was a purveyor of flesh. In any event, underaged flesh to rich and powerful people. So Tiberius spends more and more time on Capri, having the fun. Who does he leave to be in charge? He leaves his praetorian prefect, the captain of the imperial guard, a guy named Lucius Aelius Sejanus. Lucius Aelius Sejanus is lowborn. He's a competent army officer, and he has worked with Tiberius before. So Tiberius trusts Sejanus to run things without getting ideas about taking Tiberius's job. The problem is that Sejanus is a good Roman. That means he's ambitious. Of course he wants Tiberius's job. So he begins to do things like sleep with Tiberius's niece, Livilla. And Livilla is already married to a guy named Castor. But Sejanus is so winsome or charming, he gets Livilla to do things like sleep with him while her husband is drugged in the bed next to them. This is from Suetonius. You take it or leave it. Suetonius is like the soap opera historian of Rome. He has all these anecdotes and stories. And a lot of people say he was just doing a hit job on the Caesar. Well, I don't think so. I think they probably, they were pagans. They didn't have any idea of Christian restraint when it comes to sex. So why not? In any event, well, we'll find out why not. Sejanus seems to be trying to make himself emperor. And Tiberius eventually gets told. He eventually gets told. So Tiberius at first wonders, is he still emperor? And then Tiberius gets a notion from his nephew Caligula. We'll talk about it. Tiberius gets the idea that the way you get rid of Sejanus is you talk to Sejanus' second-in-command, a guy named Macro. And you offer Macro Sejanus' job. And Macro goes for it. So, all of a sudden, Sejanus finds himself under arrest, and he gets thrown off the Tarpeian Rock, and his family gets killed. On this night, Livilla's mom, Antonia, and I told you about this already, but I'll remind you of it. Livilla's mom, Antonia, decides to act as pater familias, because the leading man of the family is Claudius, the Phoebe. Remember him from the wolf story? So Claudius, the Phoebe, is incapable of acting as pater familias. So Antonia deals with her daughter. She invites her daughter to dinner. Daughter comes. They go up and see the daughter's old suite of rooms. And Antonia locks Livilla into those rooms and keeps her there until she literally starves to death. When Claudius comes up in tears saying, "Why don't you let your daughter out?" Antonia says to her son, Claudius, about her daughter Livilla, she's despicable. She connived in killing her own husband. for her lover, who she shamelessly humiliated herself with. Her punishment for killing her husband is to die. My punishment for raising a daughter like this is to be the one who sits here until she dies, hearing her cries. It took days, but eventually she dies. The Roman family is a hardcore institution when push comes to shove. So Sejanus is gone. Tiberius now has a choice. Does he go back to Rome and rule, or does he stay on his happy island? Well, he stays on his happy island and gets his nephew Caligula to become his partner. Now, everyone who still can talk to Tiberius says that Caligula is the worst possible choice that he could make. That Caligula is perverse, even by Tiberius' standards. That Caligula is a bit insane. And Tiberius laughs on one occasion. The reason Tiberius picks this unsuitable nephew, who's crazy, is because Tiberius is so angry with the people of Rome for not loving him that he's going to purposefully give them a nut job for a ruler. And they'll look back on his time with nostalgia. They'll end up loving Tiberius because Caligula ends up being so terrible. That's Tiberius's plan. So Caligula is associated, Caligula is adopted as Tiberius's son and heir. The story goes that Caligula is at Capri and he calls leading senators there and he says, Senators, I regret to inform you that our father of the country, Tiberius, died in his sleep last night. And as he's talking, Tiberius starts shouting out from his room, I want my breakfast! Bring me my breakfast! Caligula says, hold on. Macro, come with me. They go into the bedroom. There's the sound of smothering, as in pillow. And they come out and they say, we regret to inform you that our Lord and Master Tiberius, for real, just expired. He almost died in his sleep, but he finally gave his last gasp while asking for breakfast. And it's clear they killed him. But what are they going? What are the senators going to do? These guys have the army and they have the crowd, and yeah, hail Caesar, Caligula Caesar. Okay. So let's talk Caligula. Caligula is the son of Tiberius's. Actually, he's the grandson of Tiberius's brother Drusus. Tiberius's brother Drusus had a son named Germanicus, who ends up fighting and beating the Germans for a while. But Germanicus, after fighting in Germany, is appointed to be governor of Syria. In Syria, Germanicus begins encountering the numbers that he fears the most. Romans who are suspicious have unlucky and lucky numbers. He begins encountering things like the corpses of cats in his bedroom, in his bed. Basically signs of witchcraft. And Germanicus is terrified of witchcraft. Eventually, Germanicus is found dead. Heart attack. Maybe poison. Probably poison. And afterwards, when he's emperor, Caligula admits he killed his father because his father didn't want Caligula sleeping with his sister. Yes, Caligula liked sleeping with his sister. In any event, Germanicus is dead. Now, where does Caligula get his name? His formal name is Gaius. Gaius. Well, when Germanicus is in Germany, the soldiers of the German legions like his family. And they make his son a little uniform. He's got a little legionary helmet and a little set of Roman armor. And he's got caligates, little tiny boots, little army boots. Caligula literally means little bootsy. Oh, little bootsy, stomp in the mud. Little bootsy, stomping in the mud. Caligula. That's the name. That's where it comes from.
Little Bootsy went off the deep end.
Yeah, well, he may have always been there. In any event, he had epileptic seizures. Not that everyone who's epileptic is a homicidal maniac, but he combined the two rather effortlessly. So little Bootsy grows up and is now emperor. He's a very young man. He's in his 20s when he becomes emperor. Tiberius was very old when he died. So, Rome's excited. Son of Germanicus, it's going to be a heroic age. And then Caligula begins doing stuff, like openly sleeping with his sister and saying that he's a god. In fact, he's not just any god. He's the God the Jews have been waiting for. He's the Messiah. He's the one true God to drive out all the other gods. So he has all the statues of the male gods in all of Rome's temples, heads chopped off. They're marble heads, replaced with his head. And all the female statues have their heads chopped off and replaced with his sister's head, because she's a goddess. He's a god, she's a goddess.
Oh, this dude's nasty.
Now, he has a nephew, Gemellus, who can't stop coughing. He's one of these kids who just has a nervous cough. He coughs all the time. In the middle of the night one night, Caligula got so sick of it, he cut his head off. Mischief managed. Problem solved. No more Gemellus coughing. You can't cough without a neck.
I don't know why he put his head off.
Now, his sister ends up getting pregnant by him, which is great. Until Caligula realized, great for Caligula, until Caligula does this math. Okay, he's a god that sprang from human parents. His sister's a goddess that sprang from human parents. It makes total sense that they should have a child, right? Because God, goddess, God children. But wait, God children had by a goddess and a god might be greater than the god, might be greater than him. So he cuts the child out of her living womb and they both die. Bloodily and horribly.
I don't think that was the solution, man.
Well, they're dead, and he's the only god left, so it worked for him. You can't make this stuff up. Truth is stranger than fiction, or horrific. Okay, Caligula loves his horse, Incitatus, and he decides that he is going to make Incitatus a senator. So Incitatus is led around the palace wearing a senatorial toga draped over him.
I like he starts every sentence with, you know what would be hilarious?
It's like that, but he means it. He does have epileptic seizures. He decides, though, he's going to war. He needs to get some glory. So he leaves Rome and goes on campaign. At first, he's going to conquer Germany. And there are some skirmishes around the Rhine River. But he decides, after all, Germany's not big enough. Not for a god. So he marches to the English Channel coast. And the thought is, maybe he will conquer Britain. But no, he's not conquering Germany or Britain because they're filled with people. He's a god, right? He's going to fight gods. He orders his legions, plural, to attack the realm of King Neptune with the command, gather seashells. For about a week, the legions of Rome's emperor, Caligula, are on the shores of the English Channel stealing treasure from Poseidon. And he demands a triumph when he comes home. And is preceded in this triumph by cartloads of seashells and dead sea life that his legions have taken. Because he has triumphed over Neptune.
He showed him.
He really did show.
You taught him a lesson.
Okay.
Yeah.
But believe it or not, Caligula's not good with money. He's a profligate spender. So he needs to raise money. Well, what he decides to do, and it works actually, it makes a lot of money, is every noblewoman, every patrician woman in Rome over the age, I think, of 10, is brought one night to the palace where they are prostituted out. We're talking anywhere from ages 10 up to 80 or 90 to whoever will pay. To whoever will pay for a single night. And he has feeble Claudius collect the money at the door. So Caligula does this. But even though he does all of this, his power is secure. He's got a guard of Germans that he brings back from Germany that they're like fanatical killers. And they'll kill on command, and he likes sicking them on people. But his power seems secure. He's done all this stuff. He's turned every female noblewoman in Rome she's basically had them violated for money. But he's still secure. And then he does the one thing that an evil dictator never should do. So if you ever become an evil dictator, learn from Caligula and don't do this. He starts having fun with his own guards. He brings a hero, a bona fide Horatius at the bridge, back home to Rome. The hero's name is Cassius Chaerea. Like Horatius, Cassius Chaerea is discovered as he is fighting an army of Germans who's trying to chase the Roman armies across the bridge of the Rhine to attack the Roman lands. And Chaerea has the bridge destroyed behind him as he fights the Germans with a small guard and holds them back until the bridge is destroyed. And then he dives into the Rhine River in his armor and swims across. Now, this is a war hero. This guy is an actual bona fide war hero. And Caligula says, of course, he's a war hero. I want him to be my praetorian prefect. I want him to be the captain of my imperial guard, even the Germans. So Chaerea gets the job, but he's so stolid. His stolidity irritates Caligula. So Caligula does things. One of the jobs of the emperor every day is to decide what the watchword is for the night. The watchword is like, "Halt! Who goes there?" Capiculus. Oh, that's the code word. Okay, you can pass. Halt! Who goes there? Marcus. Die! So the watchword is the sign that's called out and the countersign that's responded to. But he does things like say to this manliest of men, Cassius Chaerea, "Sire, what is the watchword for tonight?" "I love you. Kiss me, schmuckums." So you have Roman soldiers in dark corridors saying, "I love you." Responding, "Kiss me, schmuckums." And that's the call countersign. This is what is going to get Caligula killed. Because these are the guys that defend him, that protect his life. So Chaerea decides, because he's being personally humiliated in this way, that he's going to kill him and restore the Republic. So a plan is hatched. Caligula is at the games. Chaerea knows it. There's a special entrance and exit that the emperor uses to avoid the crowds. And what the conspirators have to do is they have to go to Caligula's box during the games and whisper to him that an important delegation is there, a delegation that he wants to see, so that he'll leave the games unexpectedly early. Chaerea will have guards on both ends of the tunnel. Plug up both ends of the tunnel with his guards, go in, and kill everyone in Caligula's retinue. So, that's what happens. Caligula is told that this ambassador is there to see him, and Caligula's been waiting for him, so Caligula gets up and leaves and goes into the tunnel with his group, and then it's, sword, sword, die, die. And Caligula is killed by Chaerea. But one person that isn't killed in this is Uncle Claw, the feed. because he's a Phoebe. He stutters, he flatulates, he belches, he seems stupid. They've had comedy wives. He was first married to an Amazon. Then Caligula, near the end of his life, he didn't know it was the end of his life, married him to this 15-year-old supermodel. Roman supermodel named Valeria Messalina. She's a patrician. She's very young. She's very beautiful, and they marry her to this 40-ish-year-old lump of a man with a hunchback and a stutter and a limp, and drools and belches and farts. And Caligula thinks it's great fun. Messalina realizes this will probably get her from being killed or prostituted out in the palace, so she goes along with it. And anyway, Claudius is spared. Claudius is trying to stay alive, and he ends up retreating to the palace. But the palace is being looted by the Praetorian guards, who are going to be out of a job if the Republic is restored. You don't need an imperial guard. And the Germans are just looking to kill someone. And then one of the Praetorian guards, as he's looting, sees two sandaled feet behind a curtain. And they yank the curtain aside, and it's Claudius. And wait a second. He's a member of the imperial family. Let's make him emperor! Claudius doesn't want to be emperor. Claudius believes in the Republic. But they hoist Claudius on their shoulders, and they start going around the palace, all hail Emperor Claudius, all hail Emperor Claudius. The Germans come in looking to kill him, and the Praetorian Guard, no, Imperator! Kaiser? Kaiser! So Claudius is made emperor not by the Senate, not by the army, but by the Imperial Guard. And it works! Claudius ultimately organizes the execution of every one of the assassins of his nephew. Not because he didn't know his nephew was bug nuts crazy. Of course he knew his nephew was bug nuts crazy. But you can't allow somebody to assassinate a member of your family and get away with it. That's bad form. You're just encouraging assassination. Okay, so we've gone through Augustus, who was a brilliant, charming emperor. We've gone through Tiberius, who's sort of a brooding, effective emperor. We went through Caligula, who's bug nuts crazy. And now we've got this Phoebe of a man, who actually turns out to, in many ways, be the best emperor since Augustus. He's not crazy. He's actually got a pretty good mind. He was a historian. Nobody ever read his books because they assumed if he can't speak, he can't write. But he was a historian, did a history of the Etruscans, did a history of Hannibal and Carthage. And he ends up bringing the budget back into balance. So all the ridiculous spending Caligula did is gone. He no longer insists on being called a god. He's the emperor. He has a job to do. You have a job to do. If you do your job well, he's fine. Claudius brings sanity back to the empire. In fact, Claudius expands the empire to include Britain. He gets several legions together and orders them to attack Britain, which they do, and they take what is now England and Wales. Pretty darn good. For a Phoebe, he decides to go to Britain near the end of the campaign to personally oversee its conquest. This is where the craziness comes back. His wife, Messalina, is now in her around 20. And she's been married to this lump of a man, and she's got drives. So she decides to challenge the chief harlot in Rome to see how many men each could take in a 24-hour period. They have a contest in the palace. Now, the harlot knows you don't beat the empress and live, so the empress does 25 in 24 hours, the harlot just does 24 in 24 hours, and Messalina wins! Isn't that great? Oh, this is creepy. Messalina walks around Rome buck naked, just for the fun of it. Again, fairly supermodelly body. But she gets around the Roman law against nakedness by wearing a single ribbon somewhere. And as long as she's got the ribbon on, she is legally classified as having worn clothes. She's not naked if she has a ribbon on. So Messalina begins doing this stuff while Claudius is away. And obviously she has lovers. So when Claudius gets back from Britain, Messalina has a plan. Claudius is going to go to the port city of Ostia, where Rome's grain shipments come, because Claudius is building some new docks there. He's building a new harbor in Ostia that can take ships all year, not just in the summertime. While in Ostia, Messalina legally divorces Claudius, marries a senator named Silanus, and declares them the new emperor and empress. Messalina and Silanus are now going to rule. When Claudius hears about this, his first words were, "Am I still emperor?" But the people around him realize what's going to happen to them if Claudius dies, because he's going to have to be killed. So they get the army. Claudius is at the head of it, and his wife Messalina and her husband, new husband, are arrested and killed. After this, Claudius is never the same. He's got a son named Britannicus, but he doesn't know if it's his. Might be his son, might be the son of one of her dozens and dozens or hundreds of lovers. He begins to retreat into himself. And then he begins acting crazy, like he marries Caligula's sister, who's his niece.
What is with these people?
I don't know.
That's just gross.
It is, and the thing is, he doesn't marry her out of love. He marries her because she can help him rule. But she's got a son by a previous marriage named Nero. So Claudius hangs on for a while. His rule gets crazier thanks to his niece wife. And soon, Britannicus is out and Nero is in. They're supposed to be partners. And then Claudius dies of a digestive problem to do with eating a bad mushroom. It was poison. So who's going to be emperor? Britannicus, who even Claudius wasn't sure was his, or Nero, who has his mom there to make sure that anyone who stands in Nero's way dies? Well, Britannicus soon dies, and Nero is now the emperor. And we will continue with Nero next time. The Julio-Claudians were... some of them were great. I mean, Augustus, really sharp. Claudius in his younger time, really good. Tiberius, except for his temper. But then there's Caligula, and you will see Nero. So, thank you. Any questions, comments, or thoughts? Thank you very much. Come again.